Joining me now from Washington is roll call columnist John Allen, as well as Washington Post reporter Jenna Johnson. Okay, to you both, we learned Friday that the Trump campaign is now open to keeping key provisions of the Affordable Care Act after promising on the campaign trail to actually repeal and replace the legislation. I want to play for you what he told our Leslie Stahl from an interview that's going to air Sunday night on 60 Minutes.
Let me ask you about Obamacare. Which you say you're going to repeal and replace. When you replace it, are you going to make sure that people with preconditions are still covered?
Yes, because it happens to be one of the strongest assets.
You're going to keep that?
Also, with the children living with their parents for an extended period, you're going to keep very
that?
much try and keep that. Adds cost, but it's very much something we're going to try and keep.
And there's going to be a period, if you repeal it and before you replace it, when millions of people could lose.
We're going to do it simultaneously. It'll be just fine. That's what I do. I do a good job. You know, I mean, I know how to do this stuff. We're going to repeal it and replace it. And we're not going to have like a 2-day period, and we're not going to have a 2-year period where there's nothing. It will be repealed and replaced, and we'll know. And it'll be great health care for much less money.
John, to you first. Is this a softening on the issue, or is Trump just becoming more familiar with the legislation?
Well, I think Trump is not particularly familiar with the details of how Obamacare works. Of course, if you continue to have the pre-existing conditions provisions in there so that people don't lose their insurance when they move insurance or have an issue, that basically requires the mandating of people being in the insurance pools, and then it requires the subsidies, so you got to pay for that. When you start trying to unwind some of this stuff, it becomes very complicated. I don't think there was ever any question that Republicans would be loath to repeal that particular piece of the law because it's so popular. And if they tried to do that, it would be political suicide. So what you're hearing from Trump is a more specific version of what he said on the campaign trail. Remember, when he said repeal and replace on the campaign trail, he didn't say he would replace it with a completely new law that had none of the old provisions. So I think we're just getting a little more detail.
Okay, Jenna, in your experience, you covered Trump. Does a backtrack line like this surprise you now that he's president-elect?
Well, it didn't, because we knew so very little about what he would replace the Affordable Care Act with. On the campaign trail, he, for months, has said that he would repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And when you would ask him, replace it with what, he would say something so great, something so much better, something so much more affordable. But he never really gave very many details about how he would make sure that these people are still getting health care, how the money would work, how any of it would work. And now that he's the president-elect, on this and on a lot of other campaign promises he has made, he's having to come up with the details. He's having to come up with a plan of how he would actually do this.
John, I want to ask you, Trump's focus has been on the economy. He wants to cut taxes, he says, while creating robust job growth. How much is on the line for Trump to really produce on this one issue alone?
I think the economy is essentially what he was running on more than anything in this campaign, doing an echo of 1992 when Bill Clinton convinced the American public that the economy was in worse shape than it actually was, and used that to beat George H.W. Bush, an incumbent president at that time. Donald Trump basically saying the American economy's in the toilet right now, is now going to be under pressure to make things better. The question is, how is he going to do that if he's putting more pressure on revenue for the government, making it more difficult for the government to produce extra jobs or to do stimulus? I think the one thing he's going after that I think a lot of people have faith in on both sides is infrastructure spending, but how he pays for that will be a big factor in whether it's successful.
Jenna, an Arab diplomat told our Margaret Brennan that messaging from the Trump team has been very positive and that they are, quote, confident they can work through any issue regarding Trump's rhetoric. Is there a level of damage control that Trump needs to do now that he's president-elect?
There is, and I think a lot of people are giving him the opportunity to do that. Earlier this week, the president welcomed him into the White House, sat and talked with him. Hillary Clinton made a phone call to him and has also been calling for unity in the country. He had one major misstep this week, though, when he tweeted out about the protests that are going on in a lot of major cities against him, saying that these are paid protesters that are being driven by the media. Two things that a lot of the people at these protests say are just not true, that they're very upset about him becoming president and that they want him to, reassure them that he's not going to be this nightmare that they've been really worried about. The next morning, he did send out a new tweet talking about passion in the country, but there's a lot of mistrust there. And in the coming days and weeks, there's going to be a big expectation, not just out to the outside world, but to people within this country, that he's going to represent everyone and that he's not going to pit Americans against each other.
That was interesting, Jenna. He turned around that protest tweet attacking the protesters to saying, wow, isn't that so great? I want to ask you, though, John, the past few days since the election, what hints have we had in what President Trump, future President Trump, will look like?
I think it's a little bit hard to tell because there's still such turmoil within his camp in terms of who's running things on his transition, who's going to get cabinet jobs. We still haven't heard the naming of a chief of staff. There's a competition there between Steve Bannon, who ran Breitbart, the alt-right website, and Reince Priebus, the Republican Party chairman. That's a huge decision. These are the two different wings of the Republican Party under the Trump construct. Warring for power. We saw a move yesterday to give Mike Pence, a conservative, control of the transition team, moving Chris Christie, a moderate, out. So I think a lot of these personnel decisions are going to determine the way that policy is shaped and what a President Trump or what the Trump presidency will look like. And the thing is, while there are people rushing to get jobs in the Trump administration, we're still not seeing that at the very high level, and that bodes poorly for him. There are not people with great experience at the very high levels of government rushing to get into the Trump administration, and he's got to try to figure out how to attract some of those people.
Raised an interesting point. I'm also curious about how media access will be. John Allen and Jenna Johnson, thank you both for joining us.
Take care.
Thanks.